Welcome to the Deck and Deck Remodel webinar. In this session, we'll cover deck save plan views, settings for decks, railing offsets and offsets for Newels, the automatic and manual framing, dimensioning for 2D and 3D, using reference display to display an as-built or the framing for the deck that is on the floor below, and then finally wrap up with the deck materials list. Let's begin with an overview of the project. I've opened a render for the sample plan, the bachelor view. In this project, the client wants to add a deck in the area in the center of the rendering. We're going to extend the deck that is existing. I've already toggled the wall at the end invisible. And if you jump ahead and look at the finished portion of the project as I turn on reference display, I've now used the reference display to superimpose the deck that will extend onto the project. And as you kind of zoom in and look at the project, you can see that we have all of the framing members that are underneath the deck. So let's go ahead and close this sample and get started with the main project. If you would like to repeat this session and get a closer look at this model, you can go to the samples page and download the Bachelor View Deck Remodel Sample Plan, and you can pull away key aspects from the session and repeat the process. Let's start with looking at the settings for the deck. As I move back over into the 3D view and we take a closer look at the deck over here, you can see that it's using a very large beam on the outside that's bearing on the outside columns. And then the railing, as I kind of twist around here, is actually on the outside of that beam. And I want to repeat this process. If I know in advance some of these settings, then I will make those changes in the default room for the deck. Let's begin with the default settings for the deck and try to replicate what we have with the as-built deck that we want to match. In the default settings here, I'm going to come over to floors and rooms and then room types. For the deck room, I'm going to use the edit option. And the settings that I'm after are really on the deck and deck support tab. Let's begin on the deck tab. Automatically generate framing for the deck. I like to use that feature, especially as I'm starting the project. As I need to do custom framing at the end, I will then let the program turn that off. The setting below this is keep deck framing after the room is deleted. If I remove the room, the deck framing will be deleted. I typically will keep this checked. I don't want to lose any of the deck framing. And then on the deck planking information, I'm going to cover some of this rather quickly. If you're new and want to watch the deck basics video, it will give you a pretty good overview of what's going on. So I'm going to come down and look at the deck planking, and the main thing I'm going to change in here are the border planks. There are no border planks on the existing deck, so I'm going to zero that out. On the deck support tab, a few settings, you can see what's going to change down in this area on the story pole. If we change this to be under joist, you can see what happens to the beam as we kind of pull this diagram up. Under joists, with joists, if you don't have it flush with the edge. So you can control exactly where this is going to move around. And you can see in the 3D view over here, it appears that that beam is pretty flush with the edge. So these settings look pretty good. Then I'm going to go in and make sure that we edit the beam information in here. And to match that beam, I'm going to change it. We've gone out, we've measured it. I'm going to set it to be 21 inches in depth. And then I'm going to set the width of this to be 5.5 inches. And then for the framing type, that's a glulam, a cedar glulam beam that we're going to use. And then I'm going to uncheck the treated option in here. Now my defaults for the materials, I've already changed that to be a darker color. You can see in the 3D view, that's where I've changed that setting in here. And then on the fill style, I've changed this. I like to show my beams a little bit different, so I've changed the type to be a solid fill with a gray and a little bit of transparency on it. Next, let's take a look at the settings for the deck railing itself. Underneath the railing tool, I'm going to come down and double click on the deck railing. Let's start on the rail style panel. I've already included that it is a panel. I've matched the existing one. You can do that on the Newels and balusters. Underneath the library, you can browse out and find these. You can also paint those in a 3D view. So I've got the railing set up. One of the things that I've done in the railing is the bottom offset. You can see as I zoom in here, this post is coming down quite a ways below the deck itself. And I've set a bottom offset. You see in the 3D view how that post is coming down. That's where that change is set up. Back on the rail style panel, I've also changed the horizontal offset. The thickness of this wall is 3.5 inches, which is really what the post is. And then on the rail style, you can see that I've set that same amount for the horizontal offset. That way, the railing is set to be on the outside of the beam in this case. And then for the spacing and information for the newels and balusters, I've got the spacing to be set up as automatic. There are a few different settings you can change depending on how you want to set up your deck. I'm going to manually maybe adjust a few of these once we get the automatic set up. And then you can set up the maximum spacing for your posts and newels. And then finally on the rails panel, here's where you can change the profile for the rail panel. I'm just going to use the existing condition that we have, which is a square profile. You can see that information for the top rail, middle, bottom rail. You can change these items. You can browse out and replace that if you want to get a different profile, and then adjust the width and the height on these. After a lot of initial default setup, let's move back over into the floor plan view and draw the deck. So as I move back over into the floor plan view, I want to point out in this view, I've actually got a Save Plan view called Deck. You can see this up here in my top drop-down called Deck. And if you take a look at this, and we look at the settings in here, I've gone in and for the selected defaults, you can see that I've got a default set for Deck. I've got deck dimensions, text, and various other things for the deck, including a specific layer set and CAD layer. If you want to get a closer look at creating Save Plan views, go to the website and you can watch a Save Plan view video. You can also download this sample plan by going to the samples page, and you can also look at these settings because I've gone in and specifically I've set up my dimensions. If you look at my centerline dimensions, I've got it set up to only pick up the newel centers when I go through and I want to dimension the newels. So I'm using the Deck Save Plan view. This looks a lot cleaner than using a working view, or if you switch over to the floor plan view, and there's a lot of noise in here with the cabinets and wall fills. I've set up a layer set for this deck view. You can see the overlay of the roof, and then this is also saved in my template plan. So when I start a new project and I'm going to work on a deck, I have it set up to be in a deck mode where dimensions and everything are set up specifically for how I'm going to design. I'm going to point out a few of these things as we go through the project and finish up this deck. Let's begin with the deck railing tool. Using the deck railing that we've already set up with the defaults, I'm going to come over here, snap on the existing deck. We'll go ahead and drag that over. You see my temporary dimensions are in here. You can also see an extension snap. That aligns with the outside wall. That makes it pretty easy. And then I'm going to come over, get the same extension snap that's going to the corner of the wall, and then I'm going to click and drag. You can always press the tab key as you're clicking and dragging before you release the left mouse button, and then you can type in a precise dimension. So if I want that exactly 10 feet, you can set that up to be exact. Let's drag this over. Again, you get the extension snap. I want to come over another 4 feet to make it 12 feet. So let's just press the tab key and I'll just put in 12 feet. And then we'll pull this one back to the back wall. We get the extension snap, and then we'll come over and pull that in. And now, as a result of this, we've formed a deck room. I have the room labels turned off. If we move over into the 3D view, you can see that we have formed the deck. And as we kind of rotate around, what I might do here is let's change the rendering technique so it's a little bit quicker. I'm going to switch this over to the standard render technique, and that way it'll be a little bit faster as I do the video. You're going to notice that the deck planking is going vertically against the house, which is opposite. I want the planking to match the existing deck condition. You can click inside the room and the planking can be controlled in here. It should be automatic. As we take a look inside here, we go over onto the deck portion and you can see the plank direction is set up to be automatic. You can turn that on, turn that off. If I turn it off and we go back in and we take a look at the deck, it's actually set up to now be corrected. I want to change the deck planking to go the opposite way down this runner. So here's what I'm going to do. Let's go back. I'm going to press undo one time here and get back to the automatic deck planking. To control the deck planking for this runner on the side, I'm going to create an invisible wall that will come right across here. And then I'm going to take a look at the deck planking. If I need to change the direction of it, then I can go into the room and adjust it. The deck planking will control the framing. If you kind of peek underneath of the deck here, you can see the framing joists are going that way. Deck planking will control it. We've also added, if you had border planks, the ability to get blocking for those border planks. So let's tile the screen, Shift F6 on the keyboard here. I'm going to use the deck railing edge tool. You can see as I kind of mouse over this, I'm going to come over, pick up the snap off the wall, and I'm going to drag that over to connect it in here. And let's take a look in the 3D view and see what happened. By putting that invisible wall, you can actually see the planking direction change. And now that I have two separate rooms with the bigger area, as I kind of come over here, you can see the deck area on room 1 and then the deck area on room 2. Each one of these now have unique settings so that I can control each of the rooms independently. This is a great way to set up your deck planking orientation by using an invisible wall in a case like this. As I kind of zoom in, let's make sure we broaden our plan view. I'm going to take this end wall and this side wall, and I'm going to put a break in the main wall, and I'm going to make these invisible so this is very close to the ground. I'm going to click on this wall here, and I'm going to use the break tool, number 3 on my keyboard. I'm going to put a break in here. And then I'm going to grab both of these walls. I'm going to set them to be invisible. You can still see them on the plan. And I'm going to set this dimension in here to be 3 feet. So we have a 3-foot invisible wall. You can kind of see what that does in the 3D view. As we pull that around here, you can see that we now have that invisible wall still needed to form the deck room. And then I'm going to go ahead and add the dimensions onto the floor plan view. Now with the dimension tool, remember my edit active view, my dimension defaults are using the deck dimensions. So it's specific for decks. For the layer, I've got this set up to be going onto the dimensioning for decks. And then all of the settings down here are set up to go specifically for my decks and that information down here. So all of my dimensioning is ready to go because of this Save Plan View has been optimized for a deck project. Using the dimension tool, I'm going to come over here, I'm going to click and drag my first dimension. We'll come over here, click and drag the next dimension. Just kind of zoom in here. Let's pull the dimension off of that room dividing wall. We'll pull that out. That looks pretty good. And then we'll use the dimension tool. Let's continue around. I don't use the automatic exterior dimension tools. If you want to do that, you can change these wall types. Initially, these wall types are typically set up to be no locate, which means when you're using the automatic dimension tool, it will not typically pick them up. But if you want to, you can use that setting and make a change to it. So we just kind of come in here and let's add our last dimension in here. Once I have this dimensioned up and I make final changes to it, I may make an adjustment. Let's just make a slight adjustment in here to say that's 6'6.5". And once I've got these changes in there, then I know my framing, which is automatic, is actually going to be on the floor below. Let's move down to the floor below and take a look at the framing. All of the framing for your decks occur on the floor below. That's not always true. If you only have a single story project, your framing will then be on the exact same floor. In this case, I have a foundation. I'm on floor 0, as you can see on the floor indicator, and all of the framing components are set up. If we take a look at the 3D view, you can see these framing items. Let's kind of zoom in here and take a look. You can see that on the edges, I need to adjust the automatic framing. I'm also going to remove all of the posts and foundations that are in here and just use the columns that we see off to the other side to support the deck. Now, as I begin adjusting the framing, I typically won't do this until the dimensions for the deck are good, because I want to take advantage of the program's automatic framing. Let's begin with the framing component of this, and let's go back over into the floor plan view here. Now, the first thing I'm going to do in cleaning up the deck framing, I'm going to remove all the foundation and post supports that the program put in. I'm going to select one of the foundations and its post. And I'm going to use the tool in my lower edit menu, and it's called the Marquee Select Similar. Once I click that tool, I'm going to click and drag a marquee around the deck so I can select all those items, and then I'm going to press the delete key. As I press the delete key, the program's going to now prompt me to say, would you like to turn off the automatic framing? Again, I usually will save this step to the point where I want to manually frame, because the program's done a pretty good job for me, and I don't want to draw in a bunch of joists if I don't have to. So I'm going to turn off the automatic framing here. Then I'm going to make a copy of the existing column. I'm going to use the copy tool. I'm going to go into sticky mode. I'm not going to worry too much about exactly where these get placed. For the purpose of the video, let's come over, but let's place one more in here, and then one over off to this corner over here. And I'll hit the space bar to get out of the sticky mode. Now that I have the supports for the main deck, I'm going to go in and change some of the joists out on the edge to be the glulam beam. Let's kind of start off to this side over here. I'm going to take and remove a couple of the joists. I'm just going to press the delete key and delete a couple of these items. Then I'm going to click on the outer beam. Let's pull that until we get a snap right in this area right here. And then we'll zoom in. We'll pull this one back as we kind of click on that beam, and I'll pull it back. And then we'll remove the joist very near the edge. As we come over here, this one looks reasonably well. I may not clean up all these items. I'll pull that in till it snaps on there. I may not clean up all the items to pull some of these back so that they're... And then I'm going to have this beam tie into the main outer beam. And we'll do something pretty similar to this beam over here that's a joist. Let's delete a couple of these items in here. I'm going to take and use the tool that's called the Object Eyedropper. I'm going to pick up the beam that I like. I'm going to click up on the rim joist over here. We'll make the change. And then that moved it over. So I'm going to use the point-to-point move tool, and we'll slide that over. I use the shortcut point-to-point move on my keyboard. And let's actually pull that in so that it snaps on the outside of that beam. And then we'll pull that into the house so that it can rest inside of there. Again, I'm not going to worry about cleaning up some of those joists for the purpose of time. Click on this guy in here and delete that one and adjust this beam over here. And we're probably getting close. One more setting over in this area. Let's make the same change. Let's use Object Eyedropper. Click on this beam over here, and then we'll click on this rim joist or deck skirt board. We'll pull that in so that it bears in this area, and we'll pull that over so that it snaps right in here. And make a final adjustment. I probably will use the point-to-point move because I think that moved it over. We'll move that up, get the snap, and then we'll pull this one over and get the snap in here. So I should have most of the beam information updated. If we go back over into the 3D view, let's take a peek at this. So as we zoom around and we look underneath the deck, you can see all the framing members. In fact, let's switch our layer set to the 3D framing set. You can see the deck framing a little bit easier as we kind of tilt up and look at the different framing members that have come in here. And then if I notice any issues as I change the deck framing, then I can make those adjustments and get that set up. Since the deck framing occurs on the floor below the actual deck, I want to show you how to set up reference display so it's easy to see this. On floor 0, you can see all the framing, and then when you're on the main floor, the framing is hidden because it's on the floor below. I like to use a reference display. If I toggle this on now, it's just using most likely the generic reference display out of the box. Let's come in here and tap on the change floor reference indicator, and you can see that the reference display right now is using the standard out of the box reference display. I've made a copy of this reference display. Let's come in here, and I'm looking for a reference display that I've already set up for the deck. And for the purpose of time, you can go in here, you can make a copy of the reference display by using the copy tool in here. And then what I've done for this reference display for the deck is I've turned on those items that I want to explicitly display. And I've got about 10 of these items that you can see. I've sorted this based on display. And then I've also muted the color to be a light gray with the exception of the deck walls. Now that I've set this up to have the new reference display, let's make sure we click to save the active view. And when I press F9 or use the reference display on the keyboard, I can now toggle this on and off so it's very easy to see the framing that is below the project. And I like to be able to do that because if I need to make any adjustments, make sure that it's aligned from the floor above, I like to use this reference display technique. Again, you'll find that underneath your change floor indicator. You can make the adjustment in here. This is part of my save plan view. So when I save the save plan view, it will then update and I will have access to it for my decks. Let me toggle that off. I want to next look at the dimensioning for the newel posts. Let's pull our main dimension out just a little bit. And I'm going to use the centerline dimension tool. Let's review this one time before I actually use it by double clicking on it. The only thing that I have selected, notice that the walls are using none, and the only thing I have checked in here for the centerline tool is the newel centers. That's the only thing that I have checked. Now when I run my centerline dimension, let's just pull that in here, pull that centerline in here, and you can see that I'm very close to being well positioned using the automatic tool. If I need to make an adjustment on one of these newels, I can come in here, I can click on it, and if I want to set the dimension, I could come in here and type in, let's go ahead and set that to be 6'6", position it. We'll go ahead and click on the next one, position that one 6'6". So it's easy to move the newels. I just click approximately where this is. We'll set this one to be 6'4". To use that tool to exactly position your newels, you can also click on the wall itself. There is a tool down here called Move Newels. This gives you access to the newel movement, so you can click on there and move it. There's also a tool in here to add a new newel if you want to come in here, position a new newel, and then I can come into this dimension, pull that in there, and add that. Let me go ahead and press the undo button a couple of times here. Let's move over into the 3D view and look at creating the dimensions in the 3D view for the newels. Let's review the Edit Active View and check what our dimension defaults are. And I already have changed this to the deck dimensions, so I've already switched that. It's going to be using the exact same dimension defaults that I was using in the floor plan view. I'll select the centerline tool, and then I'll establish the plane by clicking on it. Probably difficult to see in this session, but I've got a highlight around the wall. That will establish the plane. Once that plane is established, I'll move my dimension off to the side, then I'll click and drag and pull that through the dimensions. Let's make sure that layer is turned on. The newel posts can be moved in a 3D view just like they can be in a 2D view. If I click on the railing, I'm going to use the tool that is Adjust and Move Railings in the lower Edit tool. So I can now move this railing. You can slide it around. You can also tap on the dimension in here and then enter in an exact dimension. Let's go ahead and set that to be 6'5". So those railing newels, regardless of which view you're in, can be adjusted. Sometimes it's easy to visualize this in the 3D view. Let's tilt our view just a little bit. I have two deck rooms. I'm going to click on deck room number 1 and then deck room number 2. To generate a materials list, One of the easiest ways to do this is by room. And there's a tool that I like to use called Calculate the Structural Materials for the Deck. This generates a live materials list for the decks and walks. You can see the category ID, the size information, the description, the count, and then if you have pricing information, you have that over here. Let's review just a couple of things in here. The first thing is this is set up to be a buy list. The buy list is controlled with structural member reporting. I'll show you that after we take a look at the other options in here. A cut list, which is going to make this view a little bit longer because this is a cut list showing all the information on the cuts. And then mixed reporting and lineal length. Let's look at lineal length first. This is going to give you a lineal length of all of the items for the deck, so a little bit shorter, but it consolidates your information for lineal lengths. And then the final one here called mixed reporting. Mixed reporting is going to give you a mix between your buy list and then the lineal length. It will do the best it can to give you the best outcome of both. If you want to switch over and look at the buy list, then we can also go into the structural member reporting, set that up to be specific. So let's switch back to the buy list, and then I'm going to come into the tools, and underneath the materials list is the option for structural member reporting. Let's take a look at the buy list information. Let's go in and use the edit tool. The program often ships with a pretty large list of materials you can purchase. Let's scroll down and look at the different components in here. This is what it's going to use to generate your buy list. And as we made changes in here, it's difficult to see. We have some glulam beams that were 5.5 by 21. If I went in there and set up a structural member reporting item, I actually don't have one of those in here. To add one, I'll usually come in here, let's pick something that's not treated, that's already 5.5 by 5.5. Let's click New, and I'm going to set the depth to be 21 inches. We'll change it to be glulam, that way it matches. And then let's go ahead and set the width of that to be 12 feet, or the length of it. So now, with that information in here, you can set the pricing information. If you know what the price is, that's what will control that information. Let's go ahead and just close that and set that up to include that glulam beam that's 5.5 by 21. Once that's in the structural member list, as we move up, you can see that there's specifically 3 of those 12-footers in the buy list. The rest of them are actually in a lineal foot length that I would need to purchase. So if you know the information and the pricing, go into the structural member reporting and you can add those items. You can also sort those based on priority to create your buy list information for your decks. The final thing I'll leave you with in the deck remodel seminar is how to use reference display. A little more involved than just a simple floor above and floor below. I started the session with an overview showing the deck in a glass house view with the house and the main rendering. And what I've done here is I've actually created the deck as a deck-only project as I kind of move back over here into the view. If you're doing a project, you can see that I've created the outline of the walls of the house, and I've used the dimensions as I kind of zoom in here. If you're just doing a simple deck project and you want to match it up to the house in this case, you can dimension those walls. This is a room divider wall in here that I've used, and I've just gone out there with a laser meter and measured those, and then I created the deck separately. Now I've used reference display. Let me press F9 on the keyboard so you can actually see this. We took a look at showing the framing below, which is nice because that's occurring on the floor below using F9 and reference display. You can also use reference display to reach out to the as-built plan that I have up here on the screen. Using that reference display, I created a saved plan view called the deck with the as-built overlay. Let's go ahead and switch over to that view. And that pulls the as-built plan information in using reference display. Let's look at this a little bit closer using the tool Change Floor Reference Display. Down here you can see that it's actually using the as-built file, and then I'm using the layer set deck, and it will peek out and use that information from that file. You can toggle it on, toggle it off. I'm using F9 on the keyboard to set up reference display. If we go back in and we switch back to the deck view, let's go ahead and save that view. And then I press F9 on the keyboard. It's just using the reference display of the deck below. Camera views work the exact same way. If you take a look at how I've done this, it's using the same reference display. Let's go in and look at this. So the main file here is the as-built, and then I'm using that deck only project, and then it's matching and synchronizing. It's using the rendering type of glass house, and so reference display will superimpose the two projects over one another. That wraps up this session on deck and deck remodeling. Hopefully you found some good takeaways for your deck project. You can save those into your template plan for your next design. You can also download this particular project from our samples page. Thanks for attending and have a great day.